And good morning. Today, it's a little dreary here in Binghamton, New York, but you know what? I'm excited about doing my Smart Woman conversation today. I want to ask you, ladies, are you ready to write that book you've always wanted to write? Or are you starting to think about writing a book because people are nudging you to do so because you have a story to tell? Well, we're going to talk today about writing books, and we're going to talk about telling stories. My guest today on Smart Woman Conversations and Nurturing Big Ideas is Tara. Is it Alemany?
Alemany.
It is Alemany. I practiced that, Tara, and I thought, I should ask her. Well, let me tell you about Tara, because I actually saw Tara via a online summit I attended, and I thought, I got to have this woman on my show. Tara Alemany defies a simple definition. She is a multi-award-winning author of 7 books. She is also a speaker, business consultant, and a publisher, as well as a serial entrepreneur. Now, that should sound familiar to you people because I am a serial entrepreneur. Although she started many businesses during her career, her favorite by far is Emerald Lake Books, which she co-owns with her best friend, Mark Gerber. That's really awesome. That is a really awesome thing. This hybrid publishing company uses a unique goal-oriented approach to publishing, in which Tara combines her business and publishing knowledge to help her authors set and attain goals for their readers, their brands, and their books. Tara, that is so important. Back in my day, that is a big thing that I used to say. You have to think of your reader. I know you have a wonderful story, but let's think of it from the reader's viewpoint. Tara's latest award-winning book, Publish with Purpose, reveals the unique process Emerald Lake Books developed to help their authors set and attain their own goals. In addition to publishing, consulting, writing, and speaking, you must have a longer day than I do. Tara serves on the board of directors for a Christian writers critique group, acting as both president and chaplain of the group. In her spare time, she is a winemaker, a military mom to 2 young adults, one of each, and she is owned by a black cat. She is, when I saw that, Tara, it was like, all right, so we understand being owned by a black cat, or I have a white dog and things like that. But today, welcome, and let's start off with talking about your journey to get to Emerald Lake Books, which is by far your favorite business.
You know, it's been an interesting journey because it's been one about having to be aware of the opportunities around me. I first started my first company at the age of 19, and it was a business that was essentially handed to me on a silver platter. I had been hired for a work study program by IBM, and I was a junior technical writer doing work for them. And they kept renewing my contract because it was a 6-month contract until they reached a point where they had renewed it too many times per their policies, but they had a hiring freeze. They couldn't hire me. So they got a consulting company to hire me instead to put me back in the exact same position.
Interesting.
After about 4 months with that consulting company, the consulting company was having layoffs and said, you're the newest person on, we have to let you go, but we know IBM really wants you. If you start your own business, we'll subcontract out to you. So I had no idea what that meant. I had no idea how to do that. I was 19 years old. I was a college student, right? And so what ended up happening was I talked to a friend of mine who was already self-employed. And he said, oh, it's easy. You just start a company, Tara's Inc., and you do this, that, and the next thing. Well, I misunderstood what he meant when he said Tara's Inc. I was thinking INK because I was a technical writer. He was thinking INC because he's talking about starting a business. But that was how my first business started, was Tara's Inc., INK, writing services. Began technical writing. That lasted about 16 years. I was working for a lot of Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies during that time and did well until 9/11. And I live outside of New York City, about 90 minutes outside. But a lot of the companies that I was working for were about 45 minutes outside of New York City. And before 9/11, I would compete maybe with 6 or 7 other companies for a contract. And after it, it was 70 to 80. So I went 21 months as a single parent with 2 kids, a mortgage and a car loan with no job. And not a good thing.
No.
And so you kind of have to look around you and figure out, what's available. And in that instance, a friend of mine at church had a job validating a computer system at his company. And so he was able to bring me in as a consultant, and they hired me. It was a German company, which meant they paid for me to take German lessons every week. And I did that for 6 years, taking German lessons 2 hours a week, every week on the company's dime, spent about 10 weeks a year each year in Germany, supporting my German users. And so that was a really nice experience, but it was a little segue in my career. What that ultimately led to is layoffs in 2009, which was kind of where social media was starting to take off.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was let go from that company due to layoffs, I started focusing on the fact that a lot of small businesses were suffering because of the downturn in the economy. Circumstances beyond their control, much like my business had suffered due to 9/11. Circumstances beyond your control. How do you stay viable in that situation? And social marketing, I thought I coined the term. I really did at that time because I was digging deep into it. Part of it for me had been that when I got let go from the German company, I had discovered Twitter right around the same time because earlier that year, in 2009, I had taken a missions trip to Tanzania. And Twitter was a great way of being able to keep in touch with people because email was harder to access. So in getting into Twitter, I started to find this community online that I really enjoyed. And that community is the genesis of the first book that I was part of writing. I ended up, we had this conversation about leadership, and we ended up deciding to write a book about character-based leadership, what it takes to be a leader from who you are, not your position in an organization.
Wow.
And so that was the genesis of the first book, but it was also the genesis of my company that I started after the layoff, which was called Alemany Social Marketing. And I thought I was going to work with small businesses to help them figure out how to use social media to market. And my first guinea pig client was a good friend of mine who is a nationally known homeschooling author and speaker. And she was going to conferences telling people how I had tripled her website traffic in a month. And so I was organically getting calls from authors and speakers while I was trying to work with small businesses. It took me a year and a half to realize that I was targeting the wrong audience.
Interesting.
Once I shifted into that focus on authors and speakers, a lot of things became much more easy for me. So after that, I was part of a mastermind where friends of mine were writing books and asking for help with editing and design and layout, since that was all experience I had as a technical writer. And after doing about 7 or 8 of those, I realized that there was nothing pointing back to me as a business or brand. And so I ended up, once again, looking at the opportunities, thinking, all right, well, I'll start this little division of Alemany Social Marketing called Emerald Lake Books, and we'll see what happens. Within a few months, Emerald Lake Books was my major moneymaker, and Alemany, I was still, I was making do with, but it wasn't feeding my soul. I did want something that would allow me to make a living, but also that I felt really good about what I was contributing. And Emerald Lake Books has been that thing where I've really been able to help people achieve their goals, which is very satisfying to me, at the same time as using my knowledge and my skill to be able to I love to learn. When I was a kid, I found out in the 70s that in Russia, you could declare yourself a professional student and they would pay you room and board and a stipend to continue learning. And so at 7 years old, I tried to convince my parents to move to Russia, and they weren't into that idea in the 70s, probably even more so. But I've still taken on that, embracing that lifelong learning.
Well, that is really fascinating. And there were several little nuggets in there that really speak to me, and I think will speak to my audience. One of the things in the very beginning, where you were 19 years old and you were told to create, an ink. And interestingly, I think women today, a lot of women, so baby boomers, we'll talk baby boomers, and there are some of the younger women also, have this idea of creating a business. And like you and like me, because when I became an entrepreneur, I was the same boat. I had no clue. I didn't know how to do things. I didn't know what that meant. I mean, I learned what a DBA was, doing business as, and it holds some people back. So you had sort of opportunities, and that's why you did this thing. But then as I see down the line, you began, and this is the interesting thing about journeys and entrepreneurship, is you take a path that is not straight. It doesn't start here and end there and you're done. There are a lot of curves.
Yep.
There might even be a little turn from one thing to another. And that sounds like what happened with you, but you talk a little bit about how you recognized that Emerald Lake Books was what you should be doing. It wasn't just that people decided they wanted you to do this for them.
Right. The reason that I decided that Emerald Lake Books was the thing that was right for me to do was because one of the things that was really important to me was to be personally satisfied with the work that I got up to do every day. I wanted to get out of bed in the morning and think, I'm excited to be, working on something. Or if I knew I needed to work late at night, it wasn't going to be something that was tedious and tiresome and, I've got to do this, but, I want to get this done, And so for me, when I started working with authors and I started talking to people about what it was that they really wanted to contribute to the world, there's so many people who have such wonderful things to share, whether it's knowledge, whether it's their stories, whether it's expertise, and being able to be a part of that process is I tell the story in Publish with Purpose about Andy Andrews and the butterfly effect. And in 1963, there was, Andy Andrews is an author, has written a book called The Butterfly Effect. It talks about how in 1963, Eduardo Lorenz proposed a theory. And his hypothesis was that a butterfly on one side of the world could flap its wings and stir molecules of air that would stir other molecules of air that could change weather patterns on the opposite side of the world. And I see authors as being very much the same. We use our words to change thoughts, to build communities, to make people relax, whatever it might be, depending on what you're writing. But when those molecules of air, those words that we put out there change one life, that life shares it with somebody else. And there's this impact that we as authors can have that really I find almost spiritual. And it's one of those things that I love being a part of. And there are only so many words that I can share myself. So when I can help others get their words out there and make the positive difference that they want to make, it's very satisfying to me. One of the things that when we look at authors to work with, it's as much about the relationship with the author as it is about the book, because we want to work with positive people who are trying to affect change that is beneficial to the world. And so that's where our focus. But it's interesting because you pointed out the fact that I paid attention to opportunities. I paid attention to opportunities, yes, but more importantly, the opportunities arose because I was already doing something.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
When I started my technical writing company, I was already technical writing. When I started Emerald Lake Books, I was already working on books. So for women who really want to start something that they're passionate about, those opportunities will come when you take those first steps. Mm-hmm. So just step out in faith. Just be confident about what you have to offer and so really start doing it.
Yeah, I'm going to push back a little on that.
Okay.
Because I will remember when I first became an entrepreneur, and that kind of advice made me feel bad because I was doing things and I felt like nothing was happening. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, years later, I know lots of things were happening, and I wouldn't be where I am today if they hadn't been happening. Mm-hmm. So I think for a little bit of what you said, you mentioned spiritual, you mentioned faith, and women do have that. We have faith, but we often have it in other things or other people. We need to learn to have it in ourselves.
Yes.
So I really am glad that you brought that up, because you definitely, my last conversation, we talked about the difference between making a choice and making a decision. So you can make a choice, but if you then don't act on it, make a decision to do something, it doesn't matter what the choice was, correct?
Right. Exactly. Yep.
And so part of the, if you want to start a small business and you have never done it before, three things that I think of is there's a lot of training that you can get online or in your local community. You can learn what you need to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Networking, we're not going to talk about that, but that's important. And then the faith. The faith is really more than going to church and praying for success.
Sure.
Can you talk to that about that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Faith is faith is literally defined as believing without seeing. And so, you believe that you have something to contribute. You have a business that you want to start, and you believe that there's value in it. Maybe others aren't seeing that yet, but if you can envision what that is going to be and start pursuing that and start laying the foundation you need in order to create that, others will start to see it as well. You need to have the faith in yourself that you're capable of doing it. And I think that's actually the biggest issue, is that many of us wrestle either continually or periodically with imposter syndrome. We want to do something, but wanting to do something and believing that we can are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the issues is, we want to do this, but, we sit there and say, well, who am I to do this?
Yeah.
And that's the big stumbling block, especially as women, because we're so used to doing what everybody else needs, as opposed to the things that we want, that imposter syndrome really shackles us because it makes it hard to move forward. And so what we need to address in our own heart and mind is not who am I to do this, but who am I not to do this? A business coach of mine once told me that, if you have the answer to a solution, the answer to a problem, and you're not sharing it with people who have that problem, you're doing them a disservice.
Mm-hmm.
So if you stop focusing on who am I to do this, but how can I help these people, my target audience, whoever that might be, that changes the focus, the mindset completely, because now it's not about me, it's about them. And when it's about them, you're serving. It's an act of service, as opposed to, something that's self-centered. So I think that having the faith that you have the solution to the problem they're trying to solve. And a lot of times people think we have to know it all, but we don't have to know it all. We just need to know more than they do in order to help them solve the problem that they currently have.
Yes, and I love that. And I love the concept of giving. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things, though, is we need to do more receiving, because I think part of the faith is whether it's God or the universe or your faith, whatever your faith uses, whatever term, wants you to be successful. You have been given this gift, if you want to call it that, and you should be sharing it. And so, as you said, if we're not sharing, then it's not having an impact on the rest of the butterfly effect kind of thing, right. which is really so uplifting. So when you work with authors, for instance, I suspect that they are as uplifted by working with you as you are by working with them, because you clearly bring not just knowledge and expertise, but a focus on the person. It's a people thing. It's a people to people thing. And let's look at, well, not just your story and what you're writing, but hey, who's going to read it?
Yes.
Yep. And how is it affecting the person who reads it? And then when I did my publishing, I used to look at it from the reader's viewpoint as I would say to my authors, so this is what I understand you mean by these 3 paragraphs. And sometimes they'd say, that's not what I meant. I'd say, well, then let's work on that. Mm-hmm. And so definitely. Talk a little bit about some of you don't have to name the authors if you don't want, or you can, but the variety perhaps of authors and people you work with. They're not just women, I assume. You work with men also.
Yep. We work with both men and women, primarily United States authors, but we have a couple of authors in Australia as well. So, for us, it's, as I said, more about making that connection with the author than anything when we choose to work on a book. We look at a lot of manuscripts throughout the course of the year. We turn down quite a few of them, either because we don't feel the manuscript is quite ready, or that the manuscript isn't going to serve the purpose that the author has told us in their application that they want to serve. Or there can be a number of different reasons that we do, but our focus really is on positive messaging. And so as a result, you can have that in self-help, you can have that in memoirs, you can have that in fiction stories. So it's not that there's a specific genre that we work in, it's more of a theme that we're looking for. We have certain genres that we do avoid right now. We don't do faith-based, we don't do political, we don't do paranormal. It's just some of it we don't do either because it's not something we would feel great about working on for months, because we do steep ourselves in the material. Some of it's because we don't have that knowledge or expertise to know, it's not what we typically read, and so therefore we don't feel we can do it justice. But the things that we would definitely be reading ourselves, we enjoy working on. But it's oftentimes that first conversation with the author it'll kind of clue us in. Is this somebody that we would enjoy spending the next 6 months, talking to on a regular basis and everything, and working really hard to make their book the best that it can be? Because one of the things that we're doing that makes us a little different as a publisher is that when we're working on the production aspects of the book, I'm actually providing all this coaching to the authors. They get regular homework assignments that they have to do. And when they do get one homework assignment turned in, the next one I send out. But those homework assignments are helping them really key into what their reader is looking for, how they're going to secure endorsements, what they need to do in order to prepare for launching the book, why they've written the book in terms of what are they trying to accomplish as an author or for their business or brand. So all of these different homework assignments mean that they're really well positioned to understand how to launch the book and how to use it in order to make the impact that they want to make.
I like that. I like how to use it because, passionately, I believe that women should write more books. I'm on this kind of little movement to convince smart women who have been in business for a while to write a book so that other women can read it. And I really like the concept of the homework that you're giving, because, and I have a checklist that I give people, and it's got like 25 things that go into writing and publishing and marketing a book. And most people don't know any of them. And it's, let me ask you this, do you find that some of the people who come to you have no clue other than, well, I wrote this, here's my manuscript. They think you're going to take care of everything?
There are people who feel that way. There's also times we've gotten on a call with a potential author to work with, and they didn't really even have an understanding of what publishing meant. We've had times where we've gotten on a call, they didn't have questions for us, they didn't know what to ask or anything. It's actually one of the guides that we created is 54 questions to ask your publisher before you sign a contract. Simply because, these are things that most authors should be aware of, should have answers to before they choose a publisher, but they don't even know to ask the questions, much less what answers are right for them. So this guide, if anybody's interested, I'll give you the link later on, and you can maybe put it in the show notes to get. But
absolutely,
it's one of those things that the authors often think that the hard part was writing the manuscript, and they don't realize that was the easy bit. The hard part is actually selling the book.
Yes. And it's actually, I say it's equivalent to starting your own small business.
It is.
And so we have an ebook called Book as Business Card. And I like people to understand this is your tool. If you're in business, even if you're a fiction author, this is your tool. And you should be prepared to give a whole bunch of them away, but not to just anybody.
Yep.
Let's be thoughtful about where they're going. And then to your point, before the book is finished, you should have a marketing plan. So no doubt you cover all of this, and I will send people to your website and share your 54 questions and anything else that you have that we can share, because I do want people to write books, but I want them to understand that, again, as you just said, writing the book is just one piece.
Yes.
And so you have a pie, and now you've taken one piece out. We got to do the rest of the pie. So from your perspective, Tara, what is the part that you enjoy the most?
From my perspective, what do I enjoy the most? That's hard to answer. I mean, because there's different stages of working on the book. Right now, I'm editing somebody's fiction story, and I'm really enjoying it because it's an engaging story, but being part of the process of tightening it up so that it flows better really appeals to me a lot. I have a lot of fun with that. But I think for me that the big thing is most of our authors have gone on to become award-winning authors. Every single author who has applied for a competition, except for one because the timing was short, has won an award. And when last year I was able to actually be the one to present the award to my author, who had no idea that she was getting one. And so when you're in that scenario and being able to celebrate the success of your authors afterwards, that means the world to me.
That's really fantastic. I mean, when I was doing publishing, it was print on demand, and it was still brand new. And people didn't trust it, and there were challenges. And I'm so excited about how far it's come, and I'm excited that there are businesses like yours, because authors do need the help. No matter who you are, even if you published a book previously, it behooves you to work with someone like Tara, because you need, the coaching you described and the way you just talked about helping tighten up the prose and making it flow better and things like that. Regardless of how well we write, that other set of eyeballs is phenomenally important. In fact, talk to me a little bit or share what you can about, do you proofread or have proofreaders? Because people seem to think editors and proofreaders are the same thing, and they're not.
So our editors do the proofreading, but they do it in a different way. So typically when we work on a manuscript, I have two different editors that'll work on the same manuscript. So it's seen by different sets of eyes. And both of those editors go through it at least 2 times. So it's going through at least 4 rounds of editing there. But then in addition to that, believe it or not, I send the book to my iPhone. I open it on my Kindle app. I have the phone read the book to me.
Interesting.
That means that there's no interpretation in my mind as to what's on the page when I'm not filling in the gaps, because when you're listening to it, suddenly you hear that comma doesn't belong there, or that doesn't sound right, or what did that mean? And so the editors are doing the proofreading, but they're doing it in using technology to be able to help with it.
Right.
Because
and that sounds amazing, because we would have like 4 people look at it. And one of the things I liked about print on demand is even after 4 people had done it, there was a typo here or there. And it would be like,
that's not the end of our process. By the time we publish a book, it has been looked at a minimum of 10 times between the author, the 2 editors, and the proofreading process. And it's been looked at on the computer, it's been looked at on the phone, and it's been looked at in printed proofs by 2 different people at a minimum. And even at that point in time, there are still times when I will find something after the fact, and correct it in another round of revisions. But you have to reach a point where eventually you say, this is as good as it's going to be for now.
Yes, I mean, you have to ship. You have to ship. And but
the wonderful thing about print on demand is you can replace those print files very easily.
Yep, you fix it.
And so If you do, yes, you can fix it. It's fixable.
Yep. And we would do that. And I mean, my husband is a recovering lawyer, and he talks about legal briefs that he and his assistant would go over and over and over, and he'd still find, he'd be there handing it in or whatever, and there's a typo. But the reality is, the story is huge, but I don't want to. I want people to understand that we know you have a good story. Sometimes you have a fantastic story, and we can help you tell it. But you have to do the page layout. You have to do the good cover. You have to do the blurb. You have to do the editing. You have to do the proofreading. You have to do all of these things to make a product that readers will want to share with other people, because that's in the end. It isn't, you're not selling to one reader. You want it to be shared. It's a message. So we're kind of at the end here, Tara, and this has been really, really wonderful, because your business is similar to the one I had, but you have gone beyond, and you are creating the kinds of things that authors need: the help, the coaching, the publishing. All of those things are in Emerald Lake Books, and I'm going to share all of the links to all of those things. But let's not forget and go back to the journey that got you there. And it was recognizing not just opportunities, but it was recognizing that, hey, I kind of like doing this.
Yep. These are my
Did
gifts
you
and
know
talents.
when you were 19 that you would like doing this?
I did not know that I would like technical writing because I had started out my writing as creative writing. I was doing poetry, song lyrics, some children's writing. So when I became a technical writer, that was a long hiatus from creative writing, because it's hard to technical write and creative write at the same time.
Yeah.
But I was an English major. I always thought it would be something to do with words. I had no idea what it was going to look like.
Yeah. But and that's how I was too. And not everybody is lucky that way. Some people, they're in one profession or career or whatever, and they discover they like doing photography. Never knew. I mean, somewhere they must have liked pictures and whatnot, but and my goal is to help them see they can turn that into a business if they want, and then they can write a book about it. But
what I love is the fact that some of the authors we work with, they're publishing their first book in their 70s and 80s. And we absolutely have so much fun with that, because it's just something that they've wanted to do, but they were always working, they were raising a family, they were doing this, that, and the next thing. There was never time. And now they're retired. What are they going to do? They finally get to sit down and fulfill their dream of writing a book, and we have so much fun working with them.
I can imagine, because the stories they must have to tell. I think, my mom passed a couple of years ago, and I'm sitting here saying, why didn't I ask her this? And why didn't I write down when she told me this? And I do remember some of the stories, but I'm sure there were so many more, because every generation has its own insight into one thing or another, and how our grandparents lived, and their lives were so different and so fascinating. To me, they were fascinating. So that's really good to hear.
I was blessed to have my great-grandparents alive until my latter 20s.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow, that's really awesome. Well, Tara, this has been really phenomenal. I loved your story. I mean, as soon as you and I exchanged words about the story to begin with, it was like, well, I wanted to have you on to talk about books. Well, your story really speaks to me, and I know it will speak to others. And so what I'm going to do is share Emerald Lake Books. Any other links, any other things that you would like me to put into the notes and blog post. And that's a better way for people to connect with you. And I feel really happy that I have someone to refer people to, and when they're ready to publish a book.
I appreciate that.
So,
thanks so much for having me on. It's been a great conversation.
Awesome. This is Yvonne DeVita from Smart Woman Conversations at Nurturing Big Ideas Today, and Tara Alemany and I have been having a good time talking about the journey to publishing books with Emerald Lake Books.